So, good day to all of you listeners from Houston, Texas, to all over the United States and beyond. My name is Cynthia Blandford, and I have the honor and pleasure of hosting today's iFocus podcast. This is our launch series today on the heels of Pivot to Africa, Reimagining the Engagement with the Continent of Africa. I'm so excited to be here today. Our sponsors for today's event for the conference and expo is the Houston International Trade Development Council, President Mr. Valbert Thompson, and we have an outstanding committee who helped to plan this event over the past 6 months. We're so very excited today. We also have some sponsors. I just wanted to mention one or two, and that's Turkish Airlines, Afro Vibes TV, International Focus Magazine, and Port Houston, the City of Atlanta, and Blandford Thompson International Consulting. Again, my name is Cynthia Blandford, and I'm so excited. I have with me today a gentleman who I've had the pleasure and honor of meeting over the last couple of weeks. His name is Mr. Bill Fanjoy. His name is William Fanjoy, but I call him Bill. He's a senior advisor, private sector engagement for Prosper Africa. And he is here today to tell us a little bit about his experience with the conference, what he got out of the conference, the people that he met. And in fact, if there's some tools and tips you need to know about in terms of how to engage with Prosper Africa, he's also going to share those tips and tools with you today. So again, on behalf of iFocus Podcast, you're so very much welcome. So Bill, welcome. We're so happy to have you here in Houston, Texas.
So great to be here.
I'm hoping that you enjoyed your experience today here at the conference. Tell us a little bit about your experience.
Well, I think as I noted in the beginning of my talk early this morning, that the hard work was already realized as we walked in the doors and we all began socializing with one another, meeting, greeting. You call it press the flesh.
Yes.
You're talking about that before when we were getting ready to come. And that's it. It's a number of your partners, your friends, these great companies, U.S. government agencies that support the ecosystem of trade and investment between the U.S. and Africa, putting them all in one room and saying, go, and then giving a few tidbits of talking heads and themes. And that drives, as you can see in the second session, when you're like, shh, it's because there was so much going on. And they are just ready to go. And to be honest with you, my favorite part was the afternoon when finally you said, okay, now it's time to just chill out and let's go to our tables for the vendors who were there, who had great items, all from Africa. And I only made it to one because of the interaction. Yes. I had them coming to me, and the interaction between all of the partners and the companies. I have got probably, I'd say 15 to 20 leads of companies that said, here's what I'm doing. How do you assist? It's trade to, or it's trade back from Africa, or I've got a processing center that needs a little help. And what's your system for assistance? And then what do you do after the assistance? And it wasn't just me. It was all the other partners who were listening who would jump in and say, yeah, after you guys do this, then we're going to do this. And XM jumped in and said, we can offer insurance. And then commercial service jumps in and said, okay, we can put together these other meetings. And so the multiplier effect, when you and Val put all these great people together in one room and say, go, it was something to be part of.
Well, we're very excited because, with COVID, it was difficult to have conferences like this. Pressing the flesh was difficult. The Zoom conference calls were also difficult. And so people really want an opportunity to get out and to mingle and to network and to meet people like you who make a difference in the world of the work that we do, particularly with the continent of Africa. So for you to have explained the tips and tools and the toolbox and how people, young people, medium-sized, small, medium-sized business owners can have access to these tools to do two-way trade was amazing. You told stories, you had anecdotes, and you also just brought it down to the local level where people could really understand it. Not just a textbook theory, not going on a website, but you actually talked about stories. Can you tell us a little bit about what you learned today as you went from table to table? You said the time only allowed for maybe one or two opportunities, but what do you think was the takeaway, your biggest takeaway when you talked about the Expo tables today?
So it was beginning to develop relationships. The morning started out with me getting a complaint about someone who went online via our bureaucratic system of click and wait. And I spoke about that.
Yes.
And the click and wait doesn't work. Even though we've built it and we need to live by it. And for sure, I'm going to go back to Washington and talk about that particular wait. But with that gentleman, I began to develop a relationship with and got to speak about a specific project and to develop a relationship and past just the one click of, okay, here's my entry data. It was more than that. And it was getting to know him as an entity, as a person, as someone who cares about Africa and cares about synergies between Africa and the United States. So we cannot replicate the relationship building through video. It can't be done. And one question was, and I know that it was based on finance, was how do you de-risk? And the number one way, and there are a lot of pieces you can bring in, DFC to de-risk on the front end, or a bank to de-risk on the back end, Prosper Africa as well. But the number one way is building relationships. Because when you sign a contract, and even if you have dispute resolution built in there at a certain medium place that's not going to give either side an advantage, you don't want to go to dispute resolution.
No, you don't.
You want to know who that person is and be confident. So all of the organizations, even if it was XM, who was talking about risk insurance, DFC, political risk insurance, at the end of the day, what they're doing is they're getting to know the buyer and also the supplier and the transaction. And at a certain point, can they check the box of, yes, we believe that this is a rock solid transaction? Because, you know, business is more than just a dollar amount.
No question.
It's lives and it's livelihoods. And we're talking about an emerging middle class in Africa. So it may be even more than livelihoods or one generation. And so for that reason, all of this comes down to building those relationships and getting to know that person and being certain that at the end of the day, they're going to provide what they say that they're going to provide. And we are too. And we all care about it.
That's so exciting to hear. And, you know, I mentioned to the group today as I was giving my remarks, and I'm actually celebrating over 40 years of my experience in Africa. That tells a little bit about how old I am, but that's okay. The good news is that it took me probably about almost 40 years, unfortunately, to get my first contract.
Right.
So the question is, and you have to be on the ground. And so the question is, are you on the ground? I tell people all the time, if you're not on the ground, getting to know people, understanding the culture, the food, the language, it's going to be very difficult for you to have those experiences. And even then, it still may take years. I'm very, very happy that President Biden, the President of the United States of America, has announced more recently on the heels of the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit, his commitment to position $55 billion for the continent of Africa in two-way trade. And so this may have opened up new experiences for me and other small to medium-sized businesses to now have access. Africa is the go-to continent. And so for my American friends out there, get ready. If you're not in line to take advantage of the new Africa Free Continental Free Trade Agreement, then I would say shame on all of us. It's an opportunity for $2.1 trillion in trade. So if you have an item that you want to sell in the country or a particular country on the continent of Africa, get yourself ready, get yourself prepared, your business plan, your ideas, your tips and your tools, and visit a Prosper Africa to see if you might be able to shop that opportunity for funding opportunities. So what is your thought about the Africa Free Continental Free Trade Agreement and how through Prosper Africa and relationships, small to medium-sized businesses can participate?
Well, we do have interactions with the free trade area and formulation of it. And what it represents to us is the scope of what Prosper Africa is. And that is not just one vector of all we care about is trade to Africa, exports from the United States. All we care about is investment or development. No, it's 360 trade. And so that 360 trade is really looking at Africa as a partner in understanding their needs and our needs, and finding synergy. And some of the synergy may be through our efforts, there is going to be intra-African trade. Yes. And that's good for everyone, isn't it?
Yes.
So when I look at a client and assess whether or not there is going to be success, and we begin in one vector, and that could be investment. We want to invest in your company. We're going to invest a certain amount of money for machinery. So you move from here to here. We're going to offer training through African Development Foundation or the YALI program, the Young African Leadership Initiative through State Department. But at the end of the day, what we're looking at is not just succeeding in this one area of trade or investment. So it was successful and the recipient is happy because they've moved up to that level. But then how do we link that to the next vector of trade investment? So how can we then create supply back to the U.S. of critical supply that we all know that we're looking for?
For sure.
So that's where the U.S. is a different partner. We're a different partner because we're good people here in the U.S. So we care about two-way relationships, but it also is needed. Everyone knows that we're looking for new critical supply partners and good partners. And so why not look at the diverse portfolio of 54 countries in all of Africa?
Yes.
And so in that way, we're moving from one vector to the next, and then to the next, into the next, into the one that the Africa free trade area also offers. So it really is looking at not just increasing two-way trade investment, but seeing it explode. And it's time for it to explode. I mean, you're looking at what, 2.5%, 3% of U.S. trade with Africa. And that's just miserably small, especially when we need new trading partners and they're in the midst of great economic growth, especially with an emerging middle class, which means that you're looking at the sectors that that we've all talked about for Africa, whether it's ports, infrastructure, energy, health, ICT, but you're also looking at beauty products. You're looking at entrepreneurial support and educational support for an emerging middle class that is really living for the future, for the next generation. And that just opens the doors to everything. There is nothing that they don't want to trade with.
That is so amazing. I'm so delighted. And you seem to be the right person at the right time, at the right place, doing the right thing on behalf of the American people, prosper Africa, and even the continent of Africa. I'm so excited because even for a small to medium-sized business that I am, I finally feel like there's someone I can talk to that can relate to the work that we're trying to do in the continent. You've actually lived in Africa, so you speak the language, you understand the culture, and you understand the need to have women at the table, minorities, particularly the diaspora, African Americans, the immigrant community. As you go with your instruments, your financial instruments, you recognize that you need people that look like me to help open up the doors on the continent. And I'm very happy to be one of those people that hopefully can partner with Prosper Africa to open up doors for others that look just like me. So on behalf of iFocus podcast, we're so delighted to have you here today, Honorable Bill Fanjoy with Prosper Africa. We look forward to the next series of iFocus podcast. My name is Cynthia Blandford. Thank you so much for viewing in today. We look forward to the next opportunity. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.